Hi guys, and welcome back to Chef's Choice. First of all, I want to thank all of you for the love and support that I got on my last very personal video. I'm so glad that I could reach and maybe even help some of you that deal with similar issues. So I will definitely do videos like that from time to time. If you haven't seen the video, you find it up here. But now let's talk about Eurovision. Today I want to talk about an issue that was requested in a comment. And I thought it's a great topic to discuss because most people have an opinion on it, but it's mostly only seen from one perspective. So I'm trying to give a little more insight into two questions here. The first, are the Big Five as generous as they claim to be, and therefore do they deserve an advantage in the game? And second, is automatic qualification actually an advantage worth fighting for? But I'm not a journalist, so if I say something wrong, just correct me in the comments. Let's go. France, Germany, Spain and the United Kingdom automatically qualified for the grand final since the introduction of a semi-final in 2004. After already having the privilege of participation regardless of their previous results, other than the rest of the countries that were excluded if they ranked too low in the past 5 years. They were joined by Italy after their return in 2011. Quite a few arguments are used to justify this decision. Some say those are the countries that reach the most viewers, whereas Russia though. Others say they are the biggest market to sell music in Europe, whereas Russia though. But the main argument that is used is that the Big Five were allowed this privilege based on their higher financial contribution to the contest compared to the rest of the countries, which by the way is not made out of goodwill by those countries, but because the allocation system of the application fees by the EBU, which is based on the country's relative financial status and number of potential viewers, works that way. So it's actually the EBU system that decides the fees, not the countries themselves, to assure that countries are able to compete that couldn't afford otherwise. Not a lot of numbers are actually made public, but from what can be found, the fees for the Big Five lie around 350,000 euros, while the other countries pay somewhere between 25 and 250,000 euros. So yes, the Big Five might pay 100 or 200,000 more than others, but compared to what the broadcaster spends to produce 8 hours of primetime show themselves, or to buy the rights of broadcasting a single soccer championship game, for instance, that's peanuts. Of course, that fee is only one part of the costs, the other being accommodation of the delegations, stylists, rehearsals, the whole performance, etc. But that can be as high or as little as the countries want them to be, and have no influence on the contest as a whole. So the financial argument of automatic qualification to the final is actually ridiculous in my opinion. The Big Five might be more financially important members of the EBU in general, for instance for sports events and things like that. But that has nothing to do directly with the song contest and shouldn't have any influence in its outcome. Also, let's not forget that the biggest cut of the costs by far is paid by the hosting country. The Big Five's collected contributions sum up to around 12% of the total costs, while the host country alone is responsible for around 30%, with a minimum of 5 million euros charged by the EBU. So the only country deserving some form of acknowledgement should be the host. But in general, is it fair that some countries pay more than others? If you look at it like a regular contest where everyone is equal, maybe not. But a show like that simply isn't possible if everyone pays the same. Either it is too expensive for some countries to participate in the first place, or the show needs to be downsized or stripped back by, for instance, having the same stage design every year to save costs, which makes the show a lot less exciting for everyone. So I do in fact think it is fair to have a calculation based on the country's financial capacity. And based on the small differences between the fees for country 5 to country 6 or from 6 to 7, there is one obvious question. Tell me baby where we draw the line. And tell me baby where we draw the line. Why have a Big Five and not 6 or 4 or 10? But there's one argument that always comes up that I haven't talked about yet. The power of each televote. Germany's population is much higher than Denmark's, so a single vote by someone in Germany has a smaller effect on the final points given out as a whole compared to someone in Denmark. But if that's an issue, we have to redefine the whole base of the contest. I love that it's an imaginative and comparably peaceful battle between 43 countries and not just a song contest, where we get the results by counting every vote separately. In that case, we could eliminate the country system completely and have just 43 independent acts fight for the best song, like every other show on TV. But that would take away so much of what makes the ESC so exciting. So, in conclusion to the first question, I personally think the Big Five status should be revoked. There's simply not enough merit to justify giving exactly and only those 5 countries a better position in the contest. Which brings me to the second question. Is there actually an advantage in automatic qualification? The Big Five haven't competed in the semi-final since they were introduced in 2004. Now let's have a look at their average ranking since then. We have France with an average of 18.3, Germany 16.8, Italy after they returned in 2011 with a 9.7, Spain with 18.3 and the UK with 19.5. So surprisingly they lie quite close together apart from Italy, and less surprisingly far away from being in the top 10 apart from Italy. And what surprised me the most was that even after the jury votes were reintroduced in 2009, the average scores did change only by around half a place, while Spain even ranked worse than before. Even though the juries were brought back to a large part to balance out political votes that were said to especially privilege Eastern European countries and therefore minimize the chances of the Big Five, clearly it didn't influence the Big Five's chances though. So it seems that the fear of the Big Five, or at least the original Big Four, not to qualify if they competed in the semi-finals, seems justified when they ranked in the lower third most years, right? But clearly there's no obvious advantage in it either, except being able to say they were in the final and closing their eyes to how low they would have actually ranked among all the contestants. So they never really get a real feedback on their entries as well. If they failed to qualify in the semis for a couple of years, maybe they would see more clearly what they did wrong and can reassess their selection for the next year. I have no doubt at all that with a good entry, their chances are just like every other country's. I can't imagine that France wouldn't have qualified last year. Italy probably would have qualified most of the time. And clearly, Germany wouldn't have for the past few years, but for good reasons, because they simply didn't deliver good enough entries. And I'm from Switzerland, so I know what I'm talking about. Maybe they would finally send acts that are actually representative of their music market. France seems to have learned that with Amir and Alma that are very current French pop songs. And the UK has brought up so many great musicians that I'm always disappointed with what ends up at Eurovision. Of course, once you're in a downward spiral, the really popular acts maybe don't want to be associated with the Eurovision and facing a 0-point disaster. But still, they should be able to find talented musicians and songwriters that come up with a real and original song that's not based on a Eurovision formula. Show us what your countries are made of. Give us something like Rita Ora or Adele instead of Electro Velvet. Give us something like Helene Fischer instead of Jamie Lee. Show us what your country is made of instead of buying yourself a ticket for the final and always looking for new ways to feel underprivileged. I'm sure the audience would appreciate that much more. And by that they could also broadcast the semifinals on their main channel, because people would be interested in watching their own country and the competition. And if they had sent something worth qualifying, cheer for them in the finals. That way they would also get the full potential out of what they paid for, instead of broadcasting just a final to the broad audience. So, as a short conclusion, I don't see any value in the Big Five idea, neither for them nor for the audience. I think it's purely the fear of facing the actual problem which lies in the selection of the songs. But now I'm interested in what you think. Did you like this video? Do you agree with the points I've made, or do you think I've missed something important? Tell me everything in the comments below. And to make up for this little bashing of the Big Five, I'm planning a small homage to them in my next video. If you want to see that, subscribe to my channel so you don't miss it. But for now, thank you for watching and goodbye.